the scent of a Roman library, a journey through time. A sleep-friendly exploration of ancient aromas. Hello and welcome. Tonight, we're going on a quiet journey together. A journey not through space, but through time. And not just through time, but through something even more intimate and forgotten. The sense of smell in the ancient world. Close your eyes if you'd like. Get comfortable. There's no rush here. We're going to step slowly and gently into a Roman library nearly 2,000 years ago. We're going to breathe in the air that scholars breathed. We're going to smell what they smelled as they unrolled scrolls of philosophy, poetry, and history. This isn't just a story about books. It's a story about papyrus and wood, about oil and stone, about seasons changing and dust settling. It's a story that almost no one thinks to tell, because scent leaves no ruins, no inscriptions, no monuments. And yet, it was there, real, constant, part of the daily experience of everyone who walked through those columned halls. So let's begin, slowly, at the very beginning. Imagine, if you will, that you're standing at the entrance of a Roman library. Perhaps it's the Ulpian Library, built by the Emperor Trajan in the early 2nd century. Perhaps it's a smaller library attached to a wealthy villa, or a collection in a provincial city far from Rome. It doesn't matter which one, really, because in all of them, the first thing you would notice, the dominant note in the symphony of sense, would be the same: papyrus. That word alone carries with it the weight of centuries. It's the medium on which Western civilization wrote itself into existence. And it has a smell, a very particular smell. If you've ever walked through a field of dried grasses in late summer, or stood in a barn filled with straw, you know something close to it. It's a dry smell, warm, slightly sweet, but not sugary, more like the sweetness of grain or hay. There's a vegetal quality to it, a reminder that papyrus was once a living plant, growing tall along the banks of the Nile, its triangular stems reaching toward the Egyptian sun. The Romans didn't make papyrus themselves. They imported it. Every single scroll in every single library came from Egypt, transported across the Mediterranean in merchant ships, unloaded at Ostia or Puteoli, and carried into Rome in carts or on the backs of animals. This was Egypt's gift, or perhaps Egypt's monopoly, on the written word. By Virgil, by Greek philosophers whose names had already been famous for generations. An old papyrus smells different. It smells dusty, not unpleasantly so, not moldy or rotten, but dusty in the way that old things are dusty. The fibers break down slowly over time, releasing a fine powder into the air. This dust carries with it the grassy, reedy smell of the papyrus itself, but muted now, softened, turned into something quieter, something that settles on the back of your tongue when you breathe it in. In a library holding thousands of scrolls, and Roman libraries did hold thousands, this scent would be everywhere. It would be the baseline, the background hum. Walk through the aisles between the wooden shelving units, and you'd stir up little clouds of this papyrus dust. Reach for a scroll on a high shelf, and the movement would release a small puff of it into the air, catching the light from the high windows. And there's something else about papyrus too, something almost musical. When you unroll a scroll, the papyrus makes a sound, a soft crackling, a whispering. And with that sound comes a tiny burst of scent, as if the scroll is breathing out the years it's held within itself. Readers in Roman libraries would have experienced this again and again, each time they opened a new text. That little moment of sensory anticipation, the crackle, the scent, Not silent, but quiet in the way libraries have always been quiet, with the soft sounds of people moving carefully, trying not to disturb others. And everywhere, gentle and persistent, is the smell of papyrus, dry grass, sweet straw, ancient paper, the scent of knowledge itself, if knowledge had a scent. Breathe it in, let it calm you. This is the smell of a world that took its time with words, that valued them enough to import them from hundreds of miles away, to store them carefully, to preserve them. A world where reading was not something you did quickly, scrolling with your thumb, but something you did deliberately, with your whole body, with all your senses engaged. And this smell, this papyrus smell, would follow you. It would get into your clothes. A Roman scholar, after spending an afternoon in a library, would carry home on his toga the scent of those thousands of scrolls. His family might smell it on him. His servants would smell it when they helped him undress for dinner. It was the mark of learning, the perfume of the educated class. But papyrus wasn't the only smell. It was the foundation, yes, the ground note. But there were other layers. Let's explore them, one by one, slowly and carefully, the way a Roman reader might have unrolled a particularly precious scroll. Continue with gentle, descriptive tone. If papyrus was the body of the book, ink was its voice. And like any voice, it had its own character, its own presence. Roman ink was a simple thing by our standards, but elegant in its simplicity. The most common type was made from just 3 ingredients: soot or charcoal, gum arabic as a binder, and water or vinegar as the liquid medium. Let's think about each of these for a moment. Soot, the fine black powder that collects on the inside of chimneys, on the underside of oil lamps, on any surface where smoke has lingered. To make ink, Romans would collect this soot carefully, grinding it even finer, if necessary. This soot came from burning wood, from burning oil, from the countless small fires that kept the ancient world lit and warm. So right away, Roman ink carried within it the ghost of fire, a smoky smell, ashy, the scent of burnt things, but refined, concentrated, not harsh or overwhelming, but definitely present. If you've ever stood near a wood fire after it's been extinguished, or smelled the residue in a cold fireplace, you know something of this scent. It's a dry smell, slightly acrid, with a hint of carbon. Then there was the gum arabic, a resin harvested from acacia trees. This added a very faint sweetness to the ink, and a slightly earthy, plant-based note. It's a smell that's hard to describe if you've never encountered it. Natural, organic, with a touch of the exotic, since much of the gum arabic used in Rome came from Africa or the Near East. And finally, the liquid. Water would add nothing to the scent, but vinegar, which was sometimes used, would contribute its own sharp acidic note, not strong enough to dominate, but enough to give the ink a slight tang, a brightness that cut through the smokiness. When these ingredients were mixed together, the result was a liquid with a complex but subtle aroma. Smoky, yes, slightly acidic, faintly sweet from the gum, and above all, surprisingly delicate. This wasn't the chemical. Smell of modern pen ink with its solvents and synthetics. This was an organic ink, made from fire and plant resin and simple liquids. In a Roman library, the smell of ink would not be constant or overwhelming. It wasn't as if the whole building reeked of it. Instead, it would come and go, a fleeting presence. You'd smell it most strongly when you were close to a scroll that had been recently written or recently handled. The scribe's fingers touching the text. Wood. was released, carrying with it the concentrated scent of the ink on its surface. Imagine sitting at a reading table. Romans didn't have chairs as we know them, but they had benches, stools, or they might stand at high desks, and carefully unrolling a scroll. As the text reveals itself, column by column, you catch a faint whiff of that distinctive ink smell, smoke and ash, but also something scholarly, There's something meditative about ink smell, isn't there? Even today, some people love the smell of pen ink, the way it marks paper, the way it represents the act of writing itself. For Romans, this would have been even more significant. These weren't disposable ballpoint pens. Making ink was a process. Writing was a skill. A freshly inked scroll represented hours of labor, not just by the author, but by the scribe who copied it, the person who prepared the papyrus, the merchant who imported it. And in a library where thousands of such scrolls were gathered, the cumulative effect of all that ink, even if each scroll contributed only the faintest trace of scent, would create a kind of aromatic tapestry, layer upon layer of smoky, ashy notes, woven together with the dominant papyrus smell. Scholars and readers would become so accustomed to this that they might not even consciously notice it anymore. It would just be the smell of books, the smell of learning, as natural and expected as the sight of columns and marble, or the sound of whispered conversations. But for a visitor, someone entering a Roman library for the first time, the ink would be noticeable. They would smell the papyrus first, certainly, but then, as they moved deeper into the space, as they passed by tables where people were reading, or by shelves where scrolls had recently been handled, they'd catch those subtle whiffs of smoke and ash, and they'd understand, perhaps without even thinking about it, that this was a place where writing happened, where words were preserved, where the fire of human thought was captured in soot and resin, and fixed onto plant fiber. Let that scent settle around you now. The ghost of ancient fires, the careful work of unknown scribes, the patience of ink drying in the Mediterranean sun, all of it present, faintly but persistently, in the air of the library. Now let's turn our attention to the furniture, to the structures that held and organized all those papyrus scrolls. Roman libraries weren't like modern libraries, with their metal shelving and plastic storage. Everything was made of wood, specifically wooden cabinets called armaria, the plural of armarium. These were essentially tall bookcases with cubby holes or slots where scrolls could be stored horizontally, or sometimes vertically, protected from damage. And wood, of course, has its own smell. Or rather, different woods have different smells, each contributing something unique to the overall atmosphere. The Romans had access to a variety of woods. Oak, which was common in Italy, pine with its resinous sharpness, cypress, often used in building, and cedar, the most prized wood of all for storing. Books, protective, and the Romans knew this. They knew that cedar naturally repelled insects, the very insects that would happily eat their way through papyrus scrolls if given the chance. So, armaria, especially in important libraries or for valuable texts, were often made of cedar, or at least lined with it. This meant that every time a scroll was removed or replaced, the wood would release a little more of its scent, and that scent would infuse the papyrus itself over time, protecting it, marking it as something valuable and well cared for. If you've ever opened an old cedar chest, the kind grandmothers used to store linens in, you know how there were other woods too. Oak, for example, has a much more subtle smell, dry, slightly sweet, with a hint of vanilla if it's been aged. Roman oak furniture would contribute a warm, understated note to the library's scent profile. It's the kind of smell you might not even consciously notice, but that would make the space feel solid, grounded, reliable. Pine, on the other hand, is more assertive. It has that resinous quality, sticky sweet, with a sharpness that catches in your nose. Not all library furniture would have been made of pine. It was considered a humbler wood, but it was certainly used in some contexts, and even in small amounts, it would add a bright, almost sticky note to the air. And then there's cypress. Cypress was beloved by Romans for construction because it resists rot. It has a scent that's somewhere between cedar and pine, resinous, but softer, more rounded, earthy. There's something ancient about the smell of cypress, something that connects you to deep time, to forests and mountains. All of these woods, in combination, would create what we might call the woody baseline of the library, where papyrus was the dominant smell, wood was the supporting harmony. It added warmth to the space. It added a sense of shelter, of enclosure. These weren't coalstone rooms with books floating in the air. These were places where organic materials surrounded you, where everything smelled like it grew from the earth. And here's something interesting. Wood responds to temperature and humidity. On warm days, as the sun heated, the stone walls of the library and that warmth spread into the interior. The wood would release its scent more readily. The resins in cedar and pine would become more aromatic. The dry, vanilla notes of oak would emerge more clearly. The library would smell richer, more alive on hot summer afternoons than it would on cold winter mornings. This is one of the things we've lost in our modern climate-controlled world. Ancient Romans experienced their spaces through the seasons, and those spaces changed in response. A library didn't smell the same in July as it did in January. It was a living space, breathing with the year. Picture yourself running your hand along the edge of a cedar armarium. The wood is smooth, polished by years. Romans understood that books needed protection. They didn't have climate control. They didn't have sealed environments. They didn't have the chemical treatments we use today. What they had was wood, good wood, chosen carefully, used wisely. And that wood became part of the identity of their libraries, as much as the marble columns or the bronze statues of poets and philosophers. So breathe in that wood scent now, in your imagination. Let it warm you. Cedar's sharpness, oak's subtle sweetness, pine's sticky brightness, cypress's ancient earthiness. All of it there, steady and patient, doing its quiet work of protecting the words of the past for the readers of the future. The Romans weren't passive about the preservation of their scrolls. They didn't just hope that papyrus would survive. They actively treated it with protective substances, and these substances added their own aromatic signature to the library environment. The most common treatment was cedar oil. This was different from the smell of cedar wood, more concentrated, more intense, with a medicinal sharpness that could be quite pronounced if you got close enough to smell it directly. Cedar oil was extracted from cedar trees through a process that involved heating the wood and collecting the resin that seeped out. This oil was then carefully applied to papyrus scrolls, usually to their outer edges or sometimes rubbed lightly over the entire surface. The oil served multiple purposes. It made the papyrus more flexible, less prone to cracking. It repelled insects even more effectively preservation work was actively being done. The scent would waft through the space unevenly, stronger in some places, fainter in others. And there were other oils too. Olive oil, for example, was sometimes used, though more sparingly, since it could leave marks on the papyrus. Olive oil has a different character entirely. It's softer, rounder, more obviously food-related. There's a richness to it, a slight bitterness, an herbal quality that comes from the olives themselves. When used on scrolls, it would add a subtle, almost buttery note to the library's scent profile. The point is, Roman libraries didn't smell accidental. They smelled intentional. The aromas present were there because people decided to put them there, because preservation required it, because protecting knowledge meant using these specific substances with these specific smells. And I think there's something beautiful about that. These weren't sterile environments, climate-controlled and odorless. These were spaces where you could smell the effort that went into maintaining them. You could smell the care. Every whiff of cedar oil was a reminder that someone, some librarian, some custodian, some dedicated servant had taken the time to treat that scroll, to protect it, to ensure that it would survive to be read by the next generation. Imagine being a scholar in this environment. You come to the library day after day, week after week, and the smells become familiar. You start to associate cedar oil with important texts, with the most valuable works. When you smell it strongly, you know you're near the philosophy section, or the rare poetry, or the scientific treatises that cost a fortune to have copied. The scent becomes a kind of index, a way of navigating the space, without even looking at the labels on the armaria. And when you go home, when you leave the library at the end of the day, that cedar oil smell might linger on your hands. You might notice it hours later and smile, remembering which scroll you were reading, which passage struck you, which idea you want to return to tomorrow. These preservation substances, the oils, the resins, the careful treatments, they're part of what made Roman libraries smell alive, smell maintained, smell like places where human care and attention were constantly at. Work, fighting against time and decay and the simple entropy of the universe. Every scroll treated with cedar oil was a small victory against forgetting. Let that settle with you now. The herbal sharpness of cedar oil, the round softness of olive oil, the complex sweetness of resins, all of it mixing with the papyrus, with the wood, with the ink, all of it creating a space that smells like preservation itself, like the determination to remember, to pass down, to keep the words of the past alive for the future. Now let's talk about something we don't often think about when we imagine historical scents. The building itself, the very walls and floors and columns. Roman public libraries were typically made of stone, marble, limestone, travertine, the kinds of stone that the Romans quarried throughout their empire and used to construct their most important buildings. And stone, it turns out, has a smell of its own. Stone, especially in a large interior space with limited air circulation, smells cool. Mineral, there's something almost clean about it, in a way that's different from the cleanliness of cedar oil. Cedar oil smells actively protective. Stone smells passively pure. It's the smell of deep earth, of things that have existed for millions of years, of permanence and stability. If you've ever been in a cave, or in a basement carved from rock, or in one of those old stone churches in Europe, you know what I'm talking about. There's a particular quality to the air in stone spaces. It feels heavier, somehow, denser, and it carries with it that faint mineral scent. Dusty, but not dirty. makes you aware of time. In a Roman library with its thick stone walls and marble columns, and perhaps a marble or stone floor, this scent would be omnipresent. It would be the underlying note beneath everything else, the foundation on which all the other smells were built. Papyrus and wood and oil and ink all floated through the space, but stone was the space itself, and stone affects temperature. These buildings were designed to stay relatively cool even in the heat of a Roman summer. The thick walls absorbed heat slowly during the day and released it slowly at night. Inside, especially in the middle of a hot day, there would be a refuge of coolness. And with that coolness came that stone smell, more pronounced in the shade, a reminder that you were enclosed within something solid and enduring. There's something deeply calming about the smell of stone. It's unchanging. It doesn't respond to the seasons the way wood does, getting more aromatic when warm. It doesn't fade or alter like papyrus might. It's simply there, constant, patient. It's the smell of the earth's bones. Roman architects understood this at some level, even if they couldn't articulate it the way we might. They chose stone for important buildings, not just for its structural properties, but for the sense of permanence and gravitas it conveyed. A stone library felt serious, felt eternal, felt like a place where knowledge could be stored safely for centuries. And there would have been variations in the stone smell too, depending on the specific type of stone used. Marble has a slightly different scent than limestone. Travertine, with its porous surface, might trap and hold other smells more readily. But all of them contributed to that same basic sense. This is a space made of ancient, stable, unchanging material. Think about standing in the center of a Roman library on a hot summer afternoon. Outside, the forum is blazing with sunlight. People are sweating as they go about their business. The air shimmers with heat. But inside, the temperature has dropped noticeably. Your skin registers the coolness immediately. And as you breathe in, that stone coolness enters your lungs, carrying with it the mineral scent of marble and limestone. It's a relief, isn't it? A refuge, not just physically, but somehow psychologically. The smell of stone says, this is a place apart from the chaos of daily life. This is a place where time moves differently. This is a place where the urgent concerns of the moment fade, and what matters is the long view, the accumulated wisdom of generations. That some things endure, that beneath all the organic smells, the papyrus and wood and oil, there was this mineral foundation, literally and figuratively supporting everything else. The smell of stone is the smell of patience, of waiting, of being content to exist for thousands of years without change. In a library surrounded by the words of mortal writers, themselves long dead, that stone smell was a kind of promise. These words will be preserved. These ideas will endure. We have built a house for them that will outlast us all. Now we need to talk about something that might seem less poetic, but is nonetheless important. People. After all, libraries weren't empty museum spaces. They were places where human beings came to read, to study, to think, to write. And human beings, of course, have their own scent. But here's the interesting thing. In a Roman library, the human element of the smell was actually quite muted, much more so than you might expect. Why? Well, several reasons. First, Romans of the educated classes, the people most likely to be using public libraries, were quite conscious of personal hygiene and presentation. They bathed regularly, often daily, at the public baths. They used olive oil on their skin after bathing, sometimes scented with herbs or flowers, though strongly perfume was. Generally avoided by serious scholars, they wore freshly cleaned togas or tunics made of wool or linen. Second, there was a social expectation about behavior in scholarly spaces. Romans didn't encourage the use of heavy perfumes in libraries. That was seen as frivolous, distracting, inappropriate for serious intellectual work. So while people certainly had a scent, it was generally a fairly neutral one. Clean wool, perhaps a hint of olive oil, the faint smell of skin that's been recently washed. Third, the dominant smells we've already discussed, papyrus, wood, oils, stone, were strong enough that they would have overwhelmed most subtle personal sense. You would have smelled the library environment much more strongly than you smelled your fellow readers, unless you were standing very close to someone. That said, the human presence was still there, still detectable if you were paying attention. Wool, for example, has a distinctive smell, especially when it's been worn for a while. It's a warm, slightly lanolin-rich smell, lanolin being the natural oil in sheep's fleece. A Roman toga, even a clean one, would carry this scent. And in a room with dozens of people, all wearing wool, that scent would accumulate subtly in the air. And then there's the simple smell of human bodies, even clean ones. Skin has a scent. Hair has a scent. Breath has a scent. In a quiet library, with people sitting close together at reading tables or passing each other in narrow aisles between the armaria, these scents would mingle. It wouldn't have been unpleasant, though. Not at all. It would have been comforting, actually. The smell of humanity in a space dedicated to human knowledge. A reminder that for all the abstract thinking and philosophical discussion, these were still physical beings, still creatures of flesh and blood, still subject to the same needs and limitations as everyone else. You might also smell olive oil more directly from people's skin. After bathing, Romans would often have slaves rub olive oil into their skin to keep it supple. This was especially common among wealthier Romans, the very people most likely to spend time in libraries. So there would be this subtle, warm, slightly bitter olive oil smell emanating from some readers. Occasionally, someone might wear perfume despite the social conventions. Romans did have access to perfumes, rose oil, spikenard, myrrh, various floral and herbal scents imported from across the empire. If a patron decided to wear perfume to the library, it would definitely be noticeable, perhaps even mildly scandalous. Other patrons might frown or whisper about it, but it would add a momentary note of sweetness or spice to the air before dissipating. And then there's the smell of scholarly work itself. Scribes, copying text, would have ink on their fingers. That smoky, ashy smell would cling to them. Readers who had been handling scrolls all day would carry home the scent of papyrus and cedar oil on their hands and clothes. There's something quite beautiful about this, the idea. That knowledge had a literal physical presence that marked the people who engaged with it. In winter, the human presence in the library would be more noticeable. People would be wearing heavier wool garments. The doors and windows would be closed to keep out the cold, reducing air circulation. Body heat would accumulate, and so the subtle smells of wool and skin and olive oil would become just a bit more prominent, adding a note of warmth to the otherwise cool stone environment. But even in winter, I don't think a Roman library would have smelled strongly of people. The cultural expectations around cleanliness, the dominance of other scents, and the general reverence for the space would have kept the human element subtle, respectful, appropriate. What you would have smelled most of all was the scholarly life itself. Not individuals, really, but the collective presence of learning. The sense that this was a space where people came to engage with ideas, and that this engagement left its own trace in the air, a trace made of wool and olive oil, and the faint breath of readers silently mouthing words as they read, the way ancient readers often did. So let that layer into your imaginary experience now. You're in the library. You smell papyrus and wood and cedar oil and cool stone. And moving through all of that, gentle as a breeze, is the human element, the warmth of bodies, the scent of clean wool, the occasional hint of olive oil, the breath of scholars lost in thought. It's now. Let's add one more layer of complexity to our understanding of how Roman libraries smelled, the seasons. Because these weren't climate-controlled environments with forced air and filtered ventilation. These were buildings that breathed with the year, that responded to rain and sun and wind, that changed character as the months rolled by. Let's start with spring. Spring in the Mediterranean is a time of transformation. The winter rains begin to taper off. The sun grows stronger day by day. The air warms, but not yet to the intensity of summer. Plants bloom. Everything feels fresh and new and full of possibility. In a Roman library, spring would bring noticeable changes to the scent environment. First, and most significantly, humidity. Spring brings moisture, not the heavy downpours of winter, but a gentle, persistent humidity in the air. Morning dew, occasional light rains, and this moisture would affect everything in the library. Papyrus, which had spent the dry winter becoming increasingly brittle and dusty, would begin to soften. The fibers would absorb moisture from the air, becoming more flexible. And as they did so, they would release their scent differently. The dry, straw-like smell of winter papyrus would give way to something slightly sweeter, more vegetal, almost green. It's as if the papyrus remembered that it came from a living plant. And in spring, that memory grew stronger. This wouldn't be a dramatic change. You wouldn't walk into the library and immediately think, "Oh, the papyrus smells different today." But over the course of weeks, as spring settled in, the background scent of the library would shift. The dustiness would recede. A certain freshness would emerge. The ink, too, would respond to humidity. Moisture in the air would lift aromatic compounds more readily, making the smoky, ashy smell of the ink more noticeable. On a humid spring morning, as you unrolled a scroll, you might catch a clearer whiff of that ink than you would have in the dead of winter. The scent would seem to float more freely, to announce itself more readily. The wooden shelving would respond as well. Wood absorbs and releases moisture with the seasons. In spring, as humidity rose, the cedar and oak and pine of the armaria would begin to swell slightly, and in doing so, they would release fresh waves of their aromatic compounds. A cedar cabinet that had seemed almost odorless in dry winter air would suddenly smell more prominently of cedar in the spring humidity. And the building itself, the stone structure, would respond to spring in its own way. Rain would fall on the roof and walls. Some of that moisture would seep through. Roman buildings weren't perfectly sealed the way modern ones are. And wet stone has a different smell than dry stone. It's deeper, more pronounced, almost earthy. The mineral scent of the marble and limestone would become more noticeable, more present. And what did spring air smell like in ancient Rome? It smelled like the countryside waking up, like herbs beginning to grow in the gardens, like rain on stone, like distant fields being ploughed, like the Tiber River running full with winter runoff. All of these scents would drift into the library on the spring breeze. breeze, mixing with the interior smells, creating a sense of connection between the scholarly space and the living world outside. Romans were very conscious of this connection. They didn't see libraries as hermetically sealed knowledge vaults. They saw them as part of the fabric of urban life, of natural cycles, of the great wheel of the year. Spring, in a library, meant renewal, meant fresh possibilities, meant the excitement of new ideas emerging alongside new flowers. Scholars and readers would respond to this, I think. Spring was a good time for study. The weather was pleasant, not too hot, not too cold. The light was good, with longer days, but without the harsh glare of summer. And the smells, the shifting scents of papyrus and ink and wood, all responding to the season, would create a sense of vitality, of intellectual awakening. Imagine yourself in a Roman library on a spring morning. You arrive early, perhaps just after sunrise. The doors have been opened to let in the fresh air. As you walk through the columned entrance, you smell stone that's still slightly damp from last night's dew. You smell the papyrus, softer and sweeter than it was in winter. You smell the wood of the armaria, releasing its scent more freely in the humid air. And you smell, very faintly, the world outside. Flowers from the forum gardens, rain on distant streets, the promise of warmth to come. It's invigorating. It makes you want to unroll the scroll, to begin reading, to let your mind wake up along with the season. Spring in a Roman library was the smell of clean reeds, cool stone, and gentle awakening. It was the smell of ideas stirring from their winter dormancy, ready to be engaged with fresh eyes and fresh energy. Let that spring air wash over you now. Feel the humidity on your skin. Smell the papyrus softening, the wood releasing its scent, the stone carrying traces of recent rain. It's a gentle time, a hopeful time, a good time for learning. And then comes summer. Let's start with the most obvious change, dryness. All the moisture that spring brought would be baked out of the air. Humidity would drop to almost nothing. And when that happens, when the air becomes that dry, everything changes. Papyrus, first of all, would become intensely dry. The fibers would contract. The scrolls would become stiffer, more brittle. You'd have to be more careful handling them, more gentle when unrolling them, because dry papyrus cracks more easily, and the smell would change. Gone would be any hint of green or vegetal freshness. Instead, the papyrus would smell crisp, straw-like, almost like hay dried in the sun. There would be an intensity to the scent, a concentration. It's as if the heat had distilled the essence of the papyrus down to its most fundamental character. The ink, being made from dry ingredients, wouldn't change as dramatically, but the lack of humidity would mean that scent molecules dispersed less readily. The smoky, ashy smell would be present, but more localized, less likely to drift through the air. You'd really only smell it when you were very close to the text, your nose nearly touching the papyrus. Now, the wooden shelving. That's where summer would make a real difference. Heat causes wood to release its volatile aromatic compounds much more readily than cold does. Those cedar armaria, in the heat of summer, they would smell magnificent. The sharp, clean cedar scent would intensify significantly. The resinous character of the wood would become more pronounced. Walk past a row of cedar shelving on a hot afternoon, and you'd be enveloped in that smell, almost overwhelmed by it. Pine, if any was present, would do the same thing. Heat would bring out its sticky, sweet, resinous notes. You might even see small beads of resin forming on the wood, releasing that characteristic pine smell into the air. Oak, with its more subtle character, would control contribute a warm, vanilla-like sweetness in the heat. And cypress would smell deeper, more earthy, more ancient. The oils used to preserve the scrolls would also respond to heat. Cedar oil, olive oil, various resins, all of these would become more aromatic when warm. A scroll that had been treated with cedar oil, which might smell only faintly in winter, would announce itself clearly in summer. The herbal, medicinal sharpness of the oil would fill the space around it. And then there's dust. Summer means dust, lots of it. The streets outside would be dusty. People's feet would track it in. The air itself would carry more particulate matter. In a library, this dust would settle on scrolls, on furniture, on the floor. And it would add its own note to the overall scent, dry, mineral, slightly gritty at the back of your throat. The stone of the building would warm significantly in summer. Roman architects designed their libraries with thick walls specifically to moderate temperature, but there's only so much thick walls can do when it's 95 degrees outside for weeks on end. The stone would absorb heat during the day, and even in the shaded interior, you'd feel it radiating from the walls. Warm stone smells different from cool stone. The mineral scent becomes more pronounced, almost chalky. It mixes with the dust in the air to create what you might call a desert library. Romans would adapt their library usage to the summer heat. They'd come early in the morning before the sun rose too high, or they'd come in the evening after the worst heat had passed. During the middle of the day, libraries might be shuttered, doors closed, windows covered with curtains or shutters to keep out the blazing sun. In that enclosed, still air, all the smells would intensify and concentrate. It would be almost overwhelming. The papyrus, the wood, the oils, the stone, all of it baking together in the trapped heat. But in the early morning or evening, when the doors were opened, there would be some relief. A breeze, even a hot one, would stir the air. It would carry away some of the concentrated scents. It would bring in the smell of the city, dry earth, hot stone from the streets, perhaps the scent of food cooking as evening meals were prepared. Summer was not the most pleasant time to be in a Roman library, honestly. It was tolerable, necessary even for those who needed to conduct research or continue their studies. But it required adaptation, patience, and a certain determination. Imagine yourself there on a summer afternoon. You've come to consult a specific text, something you need for your work. You enter through the columned portico, and immediately the temperature drops. Not dramatically, but noticeably. The thick walls are doing their job, but the air is still warm, and it's heavy with scent. The first thing you notice is the intensity of the cedar. The armaria are practically shouting their presence in the heat. It's not unpleasant. Cedar is a clean smell, but it's strong. Behind it, you catch the dry, hay-like scent of the papyrus scrolls, thousands of them, all baking gently in the enclosed space. There's dust in the air, you can taste it. The stone walls smell chalky, mineral, ancient. You find your scroll. As you unroll it, the papyrus is stiff, resistant. It wants to snap back into its rolled position. You have to weight down the corners. And as you read, you're very aware of the physical environment. The heat making you sweat lightly. The dry air making you thirsty. The intense aromas filling your nose with every breath. But there's also something almost sacred about it. This is serious study. This is dedication. The discomfort is part of the experience, part of what it means to truly engage with knowledge, to pursue learning even when conditions aren't ideal. Summer in a Roman library was the smell of dry reeds, warm wood, concentrated resin, and sun-warmed stone. It was intense, powerful, memorable, the smell of knowledge tested by fire, of ideas surviving even the harshest conditions. It was the smell of intellectual endurance. After the intensity of summer comes the mercy of autumn. And autumn in the Mediterranean is, in many ways, the most beautiful season. The heat breaks. Rains return, but gently at first. The light takes on a golden quality. Everything feels balanced, poised between extremes. Rain, not just a sprinkle, but a proper downpour, would transform everything. The air would suddenly be filled with the smell of wet stone, wet earth, ozone from the lightning that often accompanied autumn storms. This scent would penetrate the library, especially in the immediate aftermath of rain, and the papyrus would respond. Slowly, over days and weeks, as the ambient humidity rose, the papyrus scrolls would begin to absorb moisture from the air. They would soften, become more flexible again. The crisp, straw-dry smell of summer would gradually give way to something richer, more complex. The papyrus would smell earthier in autumn, almost like damp leaves or wet bark. Not moldy, these were well-maintained libraries after. All, but definitely more organic, more connected to the natural world. The wooden shelving would also respond to the increased humidity. After months of being dried out by summer heat, the wood would begin to expand slightly as it absorbed moisture. And this process would release fresh aromatic compounds. The cedar would smell less sharp and medicinal, more rounded and warm. The oak would develop deeper vanilla notes. The pine, if present, would smell less sticky and more forest-like. Autumn was traditionally the season when serious scholarly work resumed after the summer lull. Students would return to their studies. Philosophers would gather for discussions. Wealthy Romans, back from their country villas, where they'd retreated to escape the summer heat, would return to the city and its cultural institutions, including libraries. So there would be more human activity in the library during autumn, more people moving through the space, more scrolls being consulted, more conversations happening in hushed tones. This increased activity would stir up the various scents, mixing them together more thoroughly. The papyrus dust that had settled during the quiet summer months would be stirred back into circulation. The oils used to preserve scrolls would be disturbed as scrolls were handled more frequently, and there would be a certain energy in the air. Autumn was seen as a productive time, a time when things could get done without the enervating heat of summer or the cold discomfort of winter. In a library, this meant more copying work, more discussion, more intellectual exchange, and all of that activity had its own aromatic signature. The smell of fresh ink as scribes worked, the smell of wool clothing as people came and went, the very subtle smell of oil lamps being lit earlier in the day as the daylight hours grew shorter. The light in autumn has a particular quality, and light affects how we perceive space, including how we perceive scent. The golden afternoon light of an autumn day, filtering through high windows or open colonnades, would create an atmosphere that somehow made the scent seem warmer, more inviting. The same papyrus smell that felt oppressively dry in summer would seem comforting in autumn. The same cedar scent that was almost medicinal in summer would seem protective and pleasant in autumn. Autumn was also harvest time, and while libraries weren't directly connected to agricultural cycles, the smell of a harvest would drift into the city and into its buildings. You might catch hints of wine production, grapes being pressed, must fermenting. You might smell wood smoke more frequently as people began to prepare for winter, lighting fires in the evenings. These outside smells would mingle with the library's interior scents, creating a rich tapestry of aromas that spoke of abundance, preparation, reading, and now you're ready to leave. As you walk toward the exit, you notice how pleasant the space smells. The papyrus has a rich, earthy quality. The wood of the armaria smells deep and resonant. There's a faint hint of rain in the air. It might sprinkle this evening. And that anticipation somehow makes the current dryness more precious, more to be savored. You pass by a shelf where a librarian has recently applied cedar oil to some particularly valuable scrolls. The scent is strong but not unpleasant. It smells like care, like attention, like someone doing their job well. You think about how, in a few months, when winter comes, these scrolls will be protected, will survive, will be here for next year's readers because of this moment of preservation. Outside, through the open colonnade, you can see the golden light of late afternoon. You can smell the city, bread baking, animals in the streets, the river in the distance. But inside the library, there's a sense of calm, of balance, of everything being exactly as it should be. Autumn in a Roman library was the smell of woody papyrus, light earth, and faint oil. It was the smell of intellectual life in its prime, of work being done, of knowledge being actively engaged with. It was the smell of preparation for winter, yes, but also for the future, for the next generation of readers, for the long arc of cultural memory. It was perhaps the best season to be in a Roman library. Not too hot, not too cold, not too dry, not too humid, just right, balanced, perfect for reading, for thinking, for losing yourself in the words of the past, while being fully present in the sensory experience of the moment. And finally, winter. Winter in Rome was mild compared to Northern Europe, of course. Snow was rare, freezing temperatures unusual, but it was still winter. Cold wind blew down from the mountains. Rain fell regularly, sometimes for days at a time. The days grew short, the light grew thin and grey, and in a Roman library, winter brought its own particular character. The most noticeable thing about winter would be the cold. Stone buildings, even in relatively mild Mediterranean winters, become quite cold inside. Stone absorbs heat slowly and releases it slowly, which means that in winter, when there are weeks of cloudy, cold weather, the stone never really warms up. The interior of a library would be chilly, perhaps even colder than outside in the sun, and cold suppresses scent. This is a basic fact of physics. Aromatic molecules move more slowly in cold air, which means they're less likely to reach your nose. In a cold Roman library, all the dominant smells we've been discussing would be muted, subdued, less immediately noticeable. The wood would retreat into itself. Cedar, with its normally sharp and pronounced smell, would seem almost odorless in the winter cold. Oak and pine would contribute almost nothing to the air. You'd really have to press your nose against the wood to smell anything at all. The armaria would seem like silent guardians, their aromatic voices temporarily silenced by the season. The inks, too, would be nearly odorless. Cold papyrus, handled with cold hands by cold readers, would release almost no scent at all. The smoky, ashy character of the ink would be there in theory, but in practice, almost impossible to detect. What you would smell, more than anything, would be the stone itself. In winter, when all the other scents were suppressed, the mineral character of the building would come to the forefront. Cool stone, dense, heavy air. A slight dampness, not from humidity, but from the cold itself. The way cold air can feel wet even when it's technically dry. There would be a sharpness to the air, a clarity, almost like the smell of metal or of very cold water. And you would smell people more clearly in winter. presence would be more noticeable. The smell of wool, damp wool if it was raining outside, and people had gotten wet on their way to the library, would be significant. The smell of olive oil on skin, used more liberally in winter to combat the drying effects of cold air. Perhaps even the smell of wool that had been stored in cedar chests and carried that scent with it. There might be braziers, small portable heaters, in some parts of the library, especially in areas where valuable work was being done. These would burn charcoal and would add their own scent, smoky, warm, with a keen hint of sulfur. But braziers were used carefully in libraries because of the fire risk to all that papyrus, so their presence would be limited and carefully monitored. Winter was a contemplative time in a Roman library, with fewer daylight hours, with the cold making it less pleasant to linger. People who came to libraries in winter were serious about their purpose. They weren't casual browsers. They were scholars working on specific projects, students required to study, people who needed information for professional or legal reasons. The atmosphere would be quiet, more quiet even than usual. Footsteps would echo more in the cold air. The rustle of papyrus would seem louder somehow. Whispered conversations would carry further, and the scents, muted as they were, would seem to belong to a space in hibernation, waiting for spring to bring it back to full aromatic life. There's something beautiful about this winter quietness, though, about the way the library would seem to turn inward, to become more focused on its essential purpose, without the distracting intensity of summer smells or the pleasant richness of autumn aromas. Winter in a library was about the words themselves, the ideas, the pure intellectual content divorced from sensory flourishes. People who've also braved the cold to come here. You find your scroll. The papyrus is stiff, not from heat, as in summer, but from cold. Your fingers are clumsy as you unroll it. You can barely smell it at all. The ink on the page is visible, clear, but contributes almost no scent. You lean in closer, trying to warm the scroll with your breath, trying to make it more pliable. And in this moment, in this cold, quiet, nearly odorless space, you understand something important about Roman libraries. They weren't just about luxury or comfort. They were about commitment, about showing up, even when conditions weren't ideal, about pursuing knowledge even in winter, even in the cold, even when your fingers are stiff and your nose is cold, and the space offers you almost no sensory reward for being there. Winter in a Roman library was the smell of cold stone, dry scrolls, and faint human warmth. It was muted, quiet, almost austere, but it was also honest, pure, essential. It was the library stripped down to its core purpose, the preservation and transmission of human knowledge, regardless of season, regardless of comfort. And perhaps that's the most important scent of all, not a specific aroma, but the smell of dedication, of persistence, of caring enough about ideas to pursue them even when the world is cold and grey and offering you no particular encouragement to do so. Now that we've explored the seasons, let's narrow our focus even further. Let's think about how the scent of a Roman library changed throughout a single day. Because just as the seasons affected the aromatic environment, so too did the daily cycle of sun and shadow, activity and rest. Let's begin with morning. A Roman library would typically open at dawn or shortly thereafter. This wasn't because of any formal schedule in the way we think of library hours today, but because Romans organized their days around natural light. Reading by oil lamp was possible, but expensive and not particularly pleasant, so most intellectual work happened during daylight hours. So imagine the library just as it's opening. The night has passed. The building has been closed, doors shut. Perhaps a guard or custodian staying overnight to prevent theft or vandalism. The morning smell would be distinctive. Over the course of the night, with no air circulation, all the scents of the library would have settled, concentrated, stratified in layers like a still pool of water. The heavier aromas, the earthy notes from the stone, the woody smells from the armaria, would have sunk toward the floor. The lighter scents, any remaining traces of cedar oil, the faint residue of human presence from the previous day, would have risen toward the ceiling, would meet the fresh outside air, and there would be a mixing, a momentary complexity. If you were standing right at the entrance as it opened, you'd experience this blend, stale interior air, rich with papyrus and the wood and stone, rushing out to meet the morning freshness. Early morning air in Rome had its own character. If it was spring or autumn, there might be dew on the ground, creating a clean mineral smell. In summer, even early morning could be warm, and the air would already carry the dusty promise of heat to come. In winter, the morning air would be sharp, cold, carrying hints of wood, smoke from household fires being lit. As this outside air entered the library, it would begin to ventilate the space. The first readers to arrive, often the most dedicated scholars, the ones for whom study was a serious vocation, would experience this transitional moment. The library would be waking up, its scents shifting and rearranging themselves. The papyrus, undisturbed all night, would smell slightly different in the early morning than it would later in the day. It's hard to describe exactly how, but anyone who's been in a library first thing in the morning knows that. Book smell has a particular quality then, stiller somehow, more settled. The Roman papyrus equivalent would be the same. A calm, quiet, almost sleeping scent. As the morning progressed and more people arrived, the scent profile would become more active. Scrolls would be removed from their storage places, unrolled, consulted. Each interaction would release small bursts of scent, papyrus dust, traces of cedar oil, faint ink smoke. The cumulative effect of dozens of these small releases would be to energize the aromatic environment, to wake it up along with the people in it. Morning light has a particular quality, especially in the Mediterranean. It's clear, clean, almost crystalline. This light would stream through the high windows or through the open colonnades of the library, creating bright columns of illumination in which you could see dust motes dancing. And light affects how we perceive scent. The brightness, the clarity, would make the library's smells seem more distinct, more defined, easier to separate and identify. The stone of the building would still be cool from the night, and this coolness would affect how scents dispersed. Cool air is denser than warm air, and dense air holds scent molecules closer to their source. So in the morning, you might notice that different areas of the library had quite distinct smell profiles. Near the cedar armaria, the cedar smell would be concentrated and clear. Near shelves where scrolls had been recently treated with oils, those oil smells would be more localized. The library would be a mosaic of distinct aromatic zones. Morning was also when maintenance work often happened. Custodians might sweep the floors, disturbing accumulated dust and sending it into the air. They might apply fresh cedar oil to scrolls that needed treatment. They might rearrange furniture or retrieve scrolls that had been misshelved. All of this activity would add to the morning aromatic complexity, dust mixing with fresh oil, the smell of clean wool from the custodian's clothing, perhaps even the smell of water if floors were being washed. There's something hopeful about morning smells, isn't there? Whether of learning has a quality of fresh starts, of new ideas waiting to be discovered. The papyrus in a Roman library, smelling quiet and settled in the early morning, seemed to promise that today you might read something that would change your understanding. Today you might find the answer to a question that had been troubling you. Today you might have a thought you'd never had before. Imagine yourself arriving at the library just after dawn. You climb the steps. Roman public buildings almost always had impressive steps leading up to them, and pass through the columned entrance. The doors have just been opened. There's that momentary complexity as interior and exterior air mix. Then you step inside, and the library receives you. The air is cool, especially if it's spring or autumn. The stone hasn't warmed up yet. The papyrus smell is gentle, not yet stirred up by much activity. You can smell the wood of the shelving, patient and constant. There might be a custodian in the corner, and you catch a whiff of fresh cedar oil as he treats a scroll. You make your way to your preferred reading area. Perhaps you have a favorite spot, near a particular window, or by a certain armarium. You select your scroll. As you unroll it, there's that familiar small sound, that tiny release of scent. Papyrus and ink greeting you, ready to share their contents. And you begin to read as the morning light grows stronger, as the library slowly fills with other scholars, as the aromatic environment comes alive around you. Morning in a Roman library. A good time to learn, a good time to think, a time when everything feels possible. As morning gave way to afternoon, the Roman library would undergo another transformation, particularly dramatic in summer, but noticeable in all seasons, except perhaps winter. The sun would climb higher in the sky, the angle of light through windows would shift, and most significantly, temperature would rise. We've already discussed how heat affects the sense in a library, how it intensifies the cedar, brings out the resinous qualities of wood, makes oils more aromatic, dries the papyrus even further. But there's something specific about afternoon that's worth exploring in more detail. In Roman culture, afternoon was often a time of reduced activity. This was especially true in summer, when the heat became oppressive. Many Romans would retreat to their homes for a rest during the hottest hours. What we might call a siesta, though the Romans didn't use that word. Public spaces, including libraries, might see fewer visitors in the afternoon. This meant that the library, which had been filling with people and activity during the morning, would often grow quieter as afternoon wore on. And with fewer people moving around, with less air circulation from bodies moving and doors opening, the sense would begin to settle again, to stratify, to become more concentrated. On a hot summer afternoon, this concentration could become quite pronounced. Without people to stir the air, without fresh breezes from open doors, the heat would build inside the stone structure despite the thick walls. And in that still, hot air, every scent would intensify. Pass them, and you'd be enveloped in that sharp, medicinal cedar aroma. It wouldn't be unpleasant exactly, but it would be powerful, undeniable, almost aggressive in its intensity. Any oils that had been applied to scrolls would be warm now, almost liquid. Their scent would be stronger than at any other time of day. That herbal sharpness of cedar oil, the round richness of olive oil, all of it would here's the interesting thing. If there were still readers in the library during these hot afternoon hours, they would have adapted to these conditions. They would have found the coolest spots, perhaps near the center of the building, away from sun-facing walls. They would be sitting very still, conserving energy, trying not to generate any extra body heat, and in their stillness, they might become more aware of the sense around them. When you're not distracted by movement, by conversation, by activity, your other senses become more acute. The smell of papyrus, of wood, of oil, of stone would be more noticeable, simply because there was less else to notice. In other seasons, afternoon would be less extreme but still distinctive. Spring and autumn afternoons would bring warmth without oppressive heat. The sense would be pleasant, active but not overwhelming. The library would be comfortable, productive, a good place to spend time. Winter afternoons would actually be some of the best times in the library. Whatever thin winter sun there was would have been warming the building for hours by afternoon, taking some of the edge off the morning cold. The stone might be almost warm to the touch, and in that relative warmth, the sense that had been suppressed. By morning, cold would begin to emerge, not strongly, but noticeably. The papyrus would smell slightly sweeter. The wood would contribute faint aromatic notes. It was like the library was gently exhaling after holding its breath all morning. Afternoon was also when interesting light effects would occur. The sun, lower in the sky than at noon, would create longer shadows, more dramatic contrasts. Columns would cast their shadows across the floor. Sunbeams would slice through the interior space at sharp angles, and in those beams of light, you'd see everything that was floating in the air, dust, certainly, but also the invisible made visible suggestion of all those scent. Molecules, those aromatic compounds, drifting through the space. There's something almost sacred about these afternoon moments in a library. The quiet, the warm sense, the golden light, the sense of a day halfway through its cycle, neither beginning nor ending, but suspended in a kind of eternal present. Imagine yourself there on a spring afternoon. The morning's activity has subsided. There are perhaps a dozen other people scattered throughout the library, but it feels almost empty, almost private. You've been reading for dominant. There, you catch a strong whiff of cedar from a nearby cabinet. Further on, someone has recently been working with a scroll treated with olive oil, and you smell that round, slightly bitter richness. The afternoon light is golden, almost honey-colored. It makes everything look beautiful. The scrolls in there, cubby holes, the grain of the wood, the veins in the marble columns, and the scents, too, seems somehow richer in this light, more layered, more worthy of attention. You return to your reading spot. You settle back onto your bench. The scroll lies before you, waiting. The papyrus smells warm and dry. The ink smells faintly of ancient fires. The cedar oil smells protective and pure. And you read on, accompanied by these scents, held by them, surrounded by centuries of careful preservation and human dedication to knowledge. Afternoon in a Roman library. A time of settling, a time of concentration, a time when the aromatic environment reached its daily peak of complexity and intensity, when every scent had something to say, when the very air seemed thick with the presence of words and ideas made physical. And then, inevitably, evening would come. The sun would begin its descent toward the horizon. The bright afternoon light would soften into the golden hour, then into dusk. research being conducted, most people would begin to leave. The scent profile of the library would change once again with this evening transition. First, as the temperature dropped, the intensity of most scents would diminish. The cedar, so assertive in the afternoon heat, would quiet down. The papyrus, slightly cooler now, would smell less dry and intense. The oils would thicken slightly, becoming less volatile, releasing fewer aromatic compounds into the air. But before this cooling happened, there would be a brief window, that golden hour, when the light was beautiful and the temperature was perfect, neither too hot nor too cold. In that window, the library would smell its absolute best. All the day's accumulated scents would be present but balanced. The papyrus would have that warm, dry quality without being brittle. The wood would smell rich without being overpowering. The stone would radiate stored heat while beginning to cool, creating a complex mineral meat warmth aroma. As people left for the day, each departure would disturb the air slightly. Doors opening and closing would create small drafts. These drafts would mix the scents, preventing them from stratifying as they would overnight. For a while, perhaps for an hour after the last reader departed, the library would smell dynamic, active, as if still processing the day's events. There might be a final round of maintenance in the evening. Custodians would check that everything was in order, that no scrolls had been left out, that no oil lamps, if any had been used, were still burning. They might do a final sweep of the floors, sending up one last cloud of dust and papyrus particles. They might straighten furniture, close shutters, secure doors. And then silence, stillness. The library would be alone with itself for the night. In summer, the evening cooling would be a relief to the building itself. The stone, having absorbed heat all day, would begin to release it slowly. This process would continue for hours into the night, and as the stone cooled, the scents trapped by the afternoon heat would be released more freely. Paradoxically, the library might actually smell more aromatic shortly after closure than it had in the late afternoon, as all those concentrated scents were suddenly freed by the temperature change. In winter, evening would bring deeper cold. Whatever warmth had accumulated during the day would dissipate. Quickly, once the sun set, the stone would grow cold to the touch. The air would become dense and heavy. Scents would begin their overnight process of settling and concentrating. But in winter, this would mean becoming almost imperceptible rather than becoming stronger. Evening was also when you'd most notice the scent of oil lamps if they were being used. In the final hour before darkness fell completely, some scholars might push to finish their reading, and they'd light small oil lamps too. Supplement the fading natural light. These lamps burned olive oil, and olive oil, when burned, has a distinctive smell, warm, slightly smoky, organic. It's not an unpleasant smell, but it's definitely noticeable, different from the cedar and papyrus that dominated during the day. There's something melancholy about evening in a library, even as there's something beautiful. The day's work is done or must be left undone until tomorrow. The words on the scrolls are still there, waiting, patient, but you can no longer see them clearly. The sense that accompanied your day of study will be here tomorrow, unchanged, but for now, you must leave them. Imagine yourself as one of the last to leave on an autumn evening. You've been in the library since morning, deeply absorbed in your research. You've barely noticed the passage of time, but now the light is too dim to continue. You roll up your scroll carefully, return it to its place in the armarium, sense the cedar wood, and you smell it one more time. That clean, protective scent. You gather your things. You stand and look around the library one final time before leaving. In the golden light of the setting sun, the space looks almost magical. The scrolls in their cubbyholes are like dark secrets waiting to be revealed. The columns cast long shadows, and the smell, that combination of papyrus and wood and oil. You step outside. The evening air is cool. The forum is still busy with people finishing their business before dark. And behind you, the library settles into its evening routine, cooling, quieting, concentrating its senseful. The night, preparing to wake again tomorrow. Evening in a Roman library, a time of completion, a time of transition, a time when the day's aromatic journey reached its conclusion, when all the scents that had risen and intensified throughout the day began their slow descent back into nighttime stillness. Now, as we near the end of our journey, let's think about something deeper, what it meant and what it means for a library to have a scent at all. We live in an age where scent is often considered secondary, even problematic. Modern libraries try to be odorless, or if they have a scent, it's the neutral smell of climate control, printer toner, and coffee from the cafe. We've lost something in this transition to sensory neutrality. The Romans understood, perhaps instinctively rather than intellectually, that learning is a full-body experience. When you entered a Roman library, you didn't just see the scrolls. You didn't just hear the quiet rustle of papyrus. You also smelled the place, and that smell became part of your memory of learning, part of your association with knowledge itself. There's a phenomenon in neuroscience called the Proustian effect, named after Marcel Proust's famous passage about how the smell of a madeleine dipped in tea brought back a flood of childhood memories. Scent is uniquely connected to memory in the human brain. The olfactory bulb, which processes smell, is directly connected to the hippocampus and amygdala, the brain regions responsible for memory and emotion. What this means is that every Roman scholar who spent time in a library would have those scents: papyrus, cedar, ink, stone, deeply embedded in their memory of learning. Years later, catching a whiff of cedar or dry papyrus, they might suddenly be transported back to an afternoon spent reading Plato or Cicero, to a moment of insight, to a feeling of intellectual excitement. The scent of the library would become inseparable from the content of the books themselves. This wasn't incidental. It was fundamental to how knowledge was experienced, stored, and recalled. Think about what this means for a Roman student. They would come to the library day after day, perhaps for years. Each time, they'd be immersed in that distinctive aromatic environment. The smell would signal to their brain, this is a place of learning. This is where serious thinking happens. And over time, those smells would. This is something we've lost in our digital age. Digital texts have no smell. The PDF you're reading on your screen smells like nothing, or perhaps like the coffee you're drinking while you read it, but not like the text itself. There's no sensory signature unique to the content. And while this might seem trivial, it actually matters. It matters for memory, for the embodied experience of learning, for the way knowledge integrates into our full human experience. The Romans, of course, didn't know any of this neuroscience. They didn't understand olfactory bulbs or hippocampal connections, but they knew from experience that the library had a smell, that the smell was pleasant and distinctive, and that somehow that smell was connected to their intellectual life. And different. Perhaps different oils, different woods, different regional variations in how papyrus aged. An Egyptian library would have smelled more intensely of fresh papyrus, since Egypt was where papyrus was made. A Persian library, using different materials, would have had an entirely different aromatic profile. This means that scent was actually part of what made Roman intellectual culture distinctly Roman. The experience of learning in Rome included this specific constellation of smells, and Romans who travelled to other parts of the empire might have noticed this, might have thought, this library smells different from the ones in Rome. It might have made them homesick, or it might have excited them with the sense of encountering a different intellectual tradition. Scent creates identity. It creates sense of place. It makes abstract concepts, like the library, or learning, or knowledge, into concrete, sensory realities. And there's a tragedy in the fact that we can't truly recover these scents. We can reconstruct them intellectually, as we've been doing throughout this exploration. We can say, yes, it would have smelled like papyrus and cedar, and ink. But actually experiencing it, actually standing in a Roman library and breathing in that air, that's lost to time. The buildings remain, some of them. The ruins of the Ulpian Library can still be visited, but they don't smell like they used to. They smell like modern Rome, like tourists and car exhaust and restaurant kitchens. The scent has vanished completely. No amount of careful preservation has been able to save it. And this makes sense. Scent is ephemeral by nature. It can't be frozen in amber, can't be carved in stone, can't be written down. It exists only in the moment, only in the presence of the materials that create it. When those materials disperse or decay beyond a certain point, the scent is gone forever. But here's the beautiful thing. By thinking about it, by carefully reconstructing it from historical and material evidence, by using our imagination and our understanding of how scent works, we can come close. We can create a memory of something we never actually experienced. We can know with reasonable confidence that a Roman scholar standing in a library 2,000 years ago smelled papyrus and cedar, and we can understand what that meant to them. The scent of a Roman library matters because it reminds us that the past was real. It was sensory, physical, full of smells and textures and sounds. The people who lived then were embodied beings like us, experiencing their world through their senses, making memories that included smell and touch and taste, as well as sight and sound. When we forget this, when we reduce history to pure information, pure dates and names and events, we lose something essential. We lose the humanity of it, the lived reality of it. But when we ask, what did it smell like? We're asking a fundamentally human question. We're trying to close the gap between past and present, between them and us. We're acknowledging that intellectual history isn't just about ideas floating in abstract space. It's about real people in real rooms, breathing real air, surrounded by real smells, having real physical and emotional experiences while they read and thought and learned. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, let yourself imagine that smell one more time. Papyrus and cedar, ink and stone, the smell of preserved knowledge, the smell of human effort to remember, to pass down, to keep alive. The words of the past, the smell of a world that cared enough about learning to build beautiful stone buildings to house it, to import papyrus from hundreds of miles away, to carefully treat scrolls with protective oils, to employ custodians to maintain everything. That smell is gone from the physical world, but it exists now in your imagination. strange way, by imagining it, by thinking about it, by understanding what it meant, you're keeping alive something that would otherwise be completely lost. The scent of a Roman library, dry and woody, clean and ancient, intentional and maintained. A smell that said, this matters. Knowledge matters, words matter, the past matters, and we will protect it, preserve it, pass it on. That's the true scent of a Roman library. Not just the physical smell of materials, but the smell of human determination to remember, the smell of civilization itself. And so our journey comes to an end. We've walked through a Roman library together, season by season, time of day by time of day. We've breathed in the papyrus and the cedar, the ink and the stone. We've felt the heat of summer and the cool of winter. We've imagined the morning stillness and the afternoon intensity and the evening's gentle closure. These libraries are gone now, physically, but they existed. They were real. People worked in them, read in them, had insights in them that shaped Western civilization. And all of that happened in an environment that had a very specific, very distinctive smell. Intellectual life was embodied. That knowledge for them wasn't abstract but concrete, lived, experienced through all the senses, including smell. I hope this journey has given you something valuable. Perhaps some new appreciation for the material realities of ancient life. Perhaps some new way of thinking about how learning happens. Perhaps just a pleasant collection of images and sensory impressions to carry with you into sleep. Whatever you take from this, know that the act of imagining these scents, of trying to understand them, is itself a kind of scholarship, a kind of preservation. You're keeping alive in your mind something that would otherwise be forgotten completely. The Roman libraries themselves are ruins, but the scent lives on in our collective imagination, in reconstructions like this, in anyone who takes the time to think. Yes, it would have smelled like that, like dry papyrus and sharp cedar and ancient stone. Sleep well. Dream of columned halls and scrolls in cubbyholes and golden afternoon light. Dream of a world where knowledge had a scent, where learning was a full-body experience, where libraries were not just repositories of information, but living, breathing, aromatic spaces that made you feel, with every breath, that you were in the presence of something important and enduring. The scent of a Roman library. We've recovered it for a little while in our minds. And that's a kind of magic. That's a kind of time travel. That's history at its best. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. Rest now. Let the scents fade gently as you drift toward sleep. Let the papyrus and cedar and ink and stone settle into your dreams, where perhaps a Roman scholar, long dead, is grateful that someone 2,000 years later cared enough to remember what their